Hi, boys and girls. This week's project is going to be a fun sandcastle drawing. And for this project, you will need a Sharpie, or if you don't have a Sharpie, black crayon or a black pen. We'll be using some crayons, some markers, and as always, I'll be blending the markers with water, but that part is optional. We are going to start out by drawing our sandcastle, and we're going to be making a foreground, a middle ground, and a background in this picture to show space. Our foreground will be all the way down in the bottom, so it looks like it's in the front, and my foreground is just going to be sand. So I'm going to start about a quarter of the way up the page and draw, maybe not a perfectly straight line, kind of a wiggly line there to look like a hill of sand. Now, in the foreground, I'm going to add some details, but I'm going to go ahead and move on to the middle ground for now. The middle ground will have our sandcastle. I'm going to start by drawing towers on the sides of my sandcastles by making 2 vertical lines on the left and 2 vertical lines on the right. Now, your sandcastle does not need to look exactly like mine. So if you want to wait and change this slightly or draw your own version, you're more than welcome to. I'm going to add a line across the top of each tower, and then I'm going to draw kind of a curved triangle there for the top of my 2 towers. Next, I'm going to draw the center of the sandcastle, and I'm going to make my sandcastle tiered, so it has 3 levels. And to draw the first tier, I'm going to draw a line that goes over, down, over, up. And I'm making these lines straight. So straight over, straight down, straight over, straight up. That's horizontal, vertical, horizontal, vertical. And I'll just repeat that pattern until I get to the other side of my tower. Now to draw my second tier, I'm going to bring the edges in slightly on both sides. So I'll draw a vertical line on the left and a vertical line on the right. And I'm going to repeat that same pattern for the second tier of my castle. And I'm going to add one more tier. This one, I'm going to bring the edges in some more. Draw another vertical line on both sides. Now for this tier, I'm going to make a cone on the top. And you could do it differently if you wanted to. But I'm going to draw a straight line and then my 2 curved lines into kind of a pointed shape. Now you're welcome to add more details. I'm going to add just some little texture details here underneath my towers. Just a second horizontal line and then some vertical lines. I'm also going to add some windows, and I'm going to make my windows little arch-shaped windows with a curved line on top and then a straight line at the bottom. And you certainly don't need to draw your windows like mine or in the same place. You might even be adding more to your sandcastle. And I'm going to add a door to the front of my sandcastle by making a large arch, sort of like a drawbridge. And you could add texture to this as well if you wanted to add vertical lines to make it look like wood, something like that. You could put seashells or more windows here on the sides. I'm going to add some little flags to the top of my towers. And the way I'm drawing these flags is by making a vertical line that comes straight up. And then I'm drawing a wavy line, a line that curves over and then under, kind of like a sideways S. And then repeating the exact same line under it and connecting the edge there. Let's see, I'm going to add a few more windows down here. And I think my sandcastle is complete there. So to finish up the middle ground, we're going to add a layer of ocean here. So I need to draw where the sand ends. I've got some sand in the front, but there would be also some sand behind my castle. And I want to do this right about halfway down the page, right about here. And I'm going to draw another line that goes all the way across the page, but I'm going to pick up my pen wherever parts of my castle are and just kind of hover over and then continue my line, because I don't want my line to look like it's going in front of the castle. I want to look like it's behind the castle. Now I need one more line that goes across my page. This will be my horizon line. Above this line that we just drew, we'll have the ocean. And wherever we draw our horizon line, will divide the sky and the water. So for this final line, I'm going to be about a quarter of the way from the top. And I'm going to make this line really straight since it is my horizon line. So everything above that line is the sky and everything below it is the ocean. So I might draw some details back here. Keeping in mind, I'm going to draw a little sunset here, some clouds. Keeping in mind that the middle ground and the background are much further away than my castle. So if I want to draw some details, for example, in the ocean, I'm going to make them pretty small. So for example, if I were to draw a ship out here, I'm going to make a little sailboat. It's going to be pretty small because I want it to look really far away, or a little shark fin. Again, really small detail because I want it to look like it's much further away from me than the castle. And you guys can fill in some other details in your ocean and just making some little waves. And then finally, we'll add our details to the sand. Now, here in the front, in my foreground, I want to have the largest items. So if I draw something like a seashell, and I'm drawing these little lines so I can make it look like the seashell is almost kind of buried in the sand. But I'm going to make my seashell kind of large because it is closer to me than the sandcastle. And you can draw all different shapes. You could even add little creatures if you wanted to. You could make a little crab or like a little hermit crab even. Give him some little pinchers and 6 little crab legs. You could make your crab different. Or you could draw something else altogether. Maybe you have a little seagull out there or a starfish. Now, if I draw behind the line that kind of divides my foreground from my middle ground, I would want to make objects in this section here smaller. Now, I don't have a lot of room here. So if I do draw something out here, I'm just going to make it a little smaller than the object in the foreground. So it looks like it is further away from me. All right, I think I'm just about finished with my drawing. So once you've completed all the details for your sandcastle, we are going to put away our crayons, and I'm going to start by outlining some of my castle with a brown crayon. And I'm going to try to make my castle look a little bit 3D. So I'm going to first color it very lightly. And I'm just going to do this one section here to start. And then I'm going to color the windows a little darker so they look like there's a shadow inside. And then I'm going to color along the side of that whole shape darker to make a shadow. And I would want to repeat this for as many shapes as I can. Now, if there's anything on your castle that you don't want it to look like sand, you, of course, would not want to color that part brown. Now, if you have watercolors or paint at home, you could paint your castle instead of coloring it with crayon. That would be one way to fill this in. Now, even though I'm coloring lightly, I'm still making sure I fill in the whole shape. Coloring something in lightly is not the same as kind of like scribbling. If you need more time to color your castle, you can, of course, pause the video. Now, I'm going to work on filling my windows shadows in. It makes my windows look like they're a little deeper, like there's a little crevice or a little hole kind of pressed into the side of the sandcastle. I'm going to add my shadow on the side of my tower here. And if you want it to be even more realistic, you can color kind of that dark shadow and then color a medium shadow next to it. So it kind of fades into that lighter brown crayon. That makes it look a little more rounded. Now for my tiers, I'm going to do something slightly different. And I think for my large tower here, I'm going to put a shadow on both sides. All right, so on the tiers of my castle, I'm going to add a shadow between the first tier and the second tier by coloring kind of a darker area just above my pattern here. And then I'll add a shadow between my second and third tier as well. And I'm actually going to make my door a different color. So instead of making it look like sand, I'll make it look like maybe it's made out of something else. Now, once our castle has been filled in, we want to start filling in the objects in our foreground, middle ground, and background. And when I say objects, I mean the little objects that we drew in, like the ship, the shark fin, the sun, the clouds, the little seashells and crabs, but not the entire background. We'll use markers for that part. So I'm going to go through and add some color. And for this part, I'm not going to press lightly. I'm actually going to color just about as hard as I can. I want the crayon here to be really, really dark and kind of waxy, because that way when we add the marker, it won't cover up what you've already colored. All right, I'm going to color everything in really hard. Make sure I don't miss any spots. And that might mean you need to color over it 2 times to really get everything. I'm going to color the flags on my castle. And I'm coloring those really dark too. Even my clouds and the sail of my little sailboat here, even though I want them to be white, I'm still going to color them with a white crayon so that when I add marker and kind of blend that marker with the water, it doesn't cover over those things. So even if you want something to be white, you'll want to color it white. All right. Now, once I've got all my objects colored, I'm ready to start working on the background. And for that, I'm going to want some markers. And then, of course, I've got some water with a paintbrush. Now, if you don't have a paintbrush, you can use a cotton swab, even a wet paper towel. You don't have to blend it with a paintbrush, although that is easiest. So I'm going to use my brown markers here. And you know what? I want some yellow too. I'm going to use brown and yellow. And on my sand here, I'm going to add in some kind of little scribble lines. I'm going to make, that marker works a lot better. I'm going to make an outline right on these 2 Sharpie lines that I drew in, that are the edges of the sand. And then also on these little lines here. And then everywhere else, just kind of some little quick scribble lines. And then I'm going to go back through and add the same kind of scribbly lines with yellow, and they can definitely overlap. Now I don't need to worry about my crayon because this marker won't really draw over crayon. All right, I'm going to leave that for now. Now I'm going to work on my ocean. For my ocean, I'm going to use blue markers, and I'll do the same thing. I'll kind of outline the edge of it here, and then just add some scribble lines. I'm going to go over my little waves. Now, when you add your scribble lines, you want to make sure that even though you're not filling all the space in all the way, you still want to make sure you get quite a bit of color on there. And the last thing I'll do is my sky. Now, I could make my sky blue, but I am going to make my sky look more like a sunset. So I'm going to use some yellows, pinks, and oranges. And I'll start with pink at the bottom. I'm just going to add those scribbly lines. And then orange in the middle. And you could pick different colors for your sunset, or you could make it like a sunrise. And yellow at the top. Now, if I was not going to use water, I would want to fill my marker in a little bit better. I wouldn't want to leave it so scribbly. But since I am going to blend it with the marker to fill in the white spaces, I don't have to get every little spot. So I'm just going to start with the sand, and I'm going to pull down from this very top edge here and just fill in those areas. And as I do this, I'm blending my marker. I don't need to worry about going around the crayon because as you can see, even when I paint over these objects, because I made them so waxy with the crayon, that water is going to just kind of bead up because that crayon, that wax will resist the water. So I'm just blending my brown and yellow together. And you can see it makes a nice little sandy color there. Okay. I'm going to wash my brush and do the ocean next. Now, if you have salt at home, just normal table salt, if you sprinkle some of that salt into this wet watercolor paint that we're making with marker and water, it will make a really neat little crystal pattern that will make the sand look more like sand and the water look kind of bubbly. So if you do have salt and your parents say it's okay for you to use it, you can sprinkle it on before the water dries. Make sure it's still kind of wet. And it's even better if your water is a little puddly when you sprinkle it in. And then you'll just want to leave it and let it dry for a little while before those kind of crystal patterns will show. So last, I'm going to go ahead and wash my brush again and blend the sky. Now, I got to be careful here because if I blend down, I'll mix my blue in with those warm colors I put in the sky. And again, you can see I'm painting right over my clouds, but because I colored them with that white crayon, they're going to stay white. There we have it. We're all finished with our sandcastles. I can't wait to see yours.